Hey everybody, welcome back to the Engineering Entrepreneur Podcast, episode 146. As always, this is your host, Scott Tarcy, with the permanently damaged voice, and I'm the president of CADdesignhelp.com. Before we get started, please sign up my email list on my website, CADdesignhelp.com. Once you sign up, we will send you a free PDF of the top 4 mistakes inventors make. Got a new online course. It's on the tab at the top called How to Become an Engineering Entrepreneur. If you enjoy these, please review on iTunes or Podbean. Send me an email for any feedback or requests. info@CADdesignhelp.com. Our guest this week is Darby Vannier. And Darby has over 20 years of experience as a seasoned leader, adept at building and growing organizations. As president and CEO of Indispensable Leadership Group, he excels as an executive coach, consultant, and speaker. Darby, thanks for coming on. I'm going to let you talk now and I guess tell us about your background and then let us know more info about your expertise as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Scott. I appreciate it. Well, like my intro said, thank you. I've been in some form of leadership of companies for more than 20 years, and that I've had kind of a diverse career. Starting off in retail, and I moved into the nonprofit world for about 11 years, where I was CEO of a national association, and then kind of came back into the for-profit world, where I came into a company that specializes in leadership development, executive coaching, strategic planning for organizations, and that sort of thing. Certainly throughout my entire career, I have focused a ton on leadership and building business and helping others to accomplish those things. So that's kind of got me to where I am today with Indispensable Leadership Group, which is my company. And we do fractional leadership, executive coaching, strategic coaching, and those sorts of things as well. And I wrote a book called The Indispensable Leader that deals with leadership principles and kind of talks about the interesting question of manager versus leader.
Yeah, that's always a good topic. My first question, I've always wondered, how do you become a CEO of anything unless you start your own business? Like, for example, for me, let's say I started my career working for this one company as an engineer, this company Tetra, and then I went to another one, Bosch. Like, if I wanted to become CEO of Bosch, I have no idea how I would even do that, because I was just an engineer in a cubicle, you know, not leader of anybody. So if I wanted to move from there to the CEO, how would I accomplish that?
Yeah, I don't think it's a direct path for anybody. It kind of depends on where you're at, your area of expertise, as well as the size of companies that you are within. Because obviously, if you're in a huge company, that ladder could be much longer to make it up to that position in that particular company. However, for most folks in my position, it's more of an evolution. So, like I said, I started off early in my career, right out of college, as one of 6 managers at a 22 screen movie theater. And after that, I moved into even further into retail management, where I became a store manager for Kinko's at the time. Now it's called FedEx Office. And I took over a store there, kind of got involved in some corporate level things and training and leadership training within the district and those sorts of things. And then moved into the nonprofit world just based off of my level of experience of running a business. And that's what appealed to that organization when I went there. And that transition just kind of happened over time, and you gain the experience that you need moving from one organization to another. I think, my path is a little bit different. Like I said, it's kind of different for everybody. My path is different than other people's because I went from one company to another, and that's how I made some of those transitions over time. But certainly, if you were to try to do that with any large company, it would be a much longer path to get there, potentially. And nowadays, with remote work and everything, now it's so there's so many things available to everybody out there to be able to potentially move into a role and become a COO or a CEO of a smaller company. If you could have been in a huge company in a director level position and still be able to then take over as CEO or COO of a smaller company and then work your way up from there. So it really does depend on the size of the company and again, kind of what your expertise is and what your industry is as well.
Yeah, maybe you could speak to like how engineers could, because this is the entrepreneur podcast, and you know, I never really aspired, I guess, to be the CEO of a company. I wanted to be the CEO of my own company, but like, how would you see an engineer doing it?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a great answer for that because I'm not familiar enough with your industry. However, what I would say is rather than asking how do I move along to become a CEO, it would be more how do I become the best possible leader that I can be, because that will put you in the position then to either promote along or potentially then qualify yourself for other roles in other companies. And that can be done a variety of ways. But certainly through forms of development, whether that be internal development within the company you're in or external coaching, using an executive coach or leadership development type of programs that are available out there as well. Taking advantage of those sorts of things will give you the experience that you need. And as you start to lead people, you'll gain experience that you need to move along and be promoted as well.
So can you give me some examples of that, like things you could do?
Um, well,
Like
certainly.
actions you could take, you know?
Yeah, so certainly what I advise any leader in any industry or those who are aspiring to be in a leadership role is to seek out information. And certainly one of my personal core values is lifelong learning. And that's one of the things that comes along with that, whether that be through reading something as simple as reading leadership books. It's really advisable to find yourself a good mentor, somebody who is either has been where you want to go or is currently where you want to go, who can mentor you along and give you some advice along the way to help you out. And then, of course, like I said, take advantage of other resources that are out there. Certainly executive coaching is a good option because that gives you some one-on-one time. There's group coaching out there too, but if you can afford it or get your employer to spring for it, definitely if you can get some one-on-one time with an executive coach on an ongoing basis, especially as you start to lead people, that's going to help you be able to gain some experience there as well, because a good coach, first off, they don't necessarily need to know your industry. So you don't need to find somebody who is in the engineering industry or knows that. If they're a good coach, what they will do is they will ask whatever questions they need to ask to help you talk through whatever issues you're dealing with regard to leadership and leading other people, or even dealing with your boss, or learning how to better delegate or be held accountable or hold others accountable, whatever that is. They can actually help you walk through those things and ask you the right questions to help you get to the solution that you need to get to. Now, that's not a silver bullet, and it's not a quick thing, because you're gonna do this over a variety of different coaching sessions where you're going to talk through things, and certainly different things come up, and you're going to want to walk away with some things from that coach. They will give you some things. If they're a good coach, they'll give you some things to walk away and work on and try, and maybe some homework to come back with the next time. So that way you start to experience from somebody who has led people what it's like to actually do those things, and what's most important to look at as you go down that path.
So since you're an executive leadership coach as well, right?
Yep.
So since you're that, what give explain to us what like that coaching looks like.
Yeah.
Like if
So
you
it's
were
kind of,
coaching me, how would that go?
sure. So it's different for everybody. And certainly I don't want to confuse this. I want to be sure I mention this. An executive coach or a leadership coach is different than a life coach. So life coaches are different. They're going to talk more personal stuff. That is not what I do. I'm going to talk to you more about business related items. So if I start start coaching with somebody, what I'm going to do is we're probably going to spend at least one session, maybe two, just kind of getting to know each other, because there has to be a certain level of trust established for you to be able to actually trust that what I say is valid. I also need to understand what your background is, what your level of experience is. Some coaches will use an assessment going in. So they may have you take an assessment so that they can look at the assessment and understand, again, what your level of experience is with certain things, maybe what your challenges are and that sort of thing. Once you get into coaching, fully into coaching, then it really is about you. Like, you guide the session. You're going to come and I'm going to say, what do you want to work on this month or this week or whatever, depending on how often our meetings are. And you're going to come with a particular challenge that you're having, whether, like I said, some of those things earlier, whether you're having some difficulty delegating, you're having difficulty with an employee, you're having difficulty with a peer or a boss, or whatever that looks like. And then I'm going to let you tell your story, and I'm going to ask you questions about that to further that along, and ask you to give me more details and ask you what you have tried so far. And then ask you, I will probably start by asking you, what else do you think you can try? And the reason that a good coach does that is kind of what I was saying earlier. They don't always have the level of experience in the industry that you're in. I mean, no coach is going to be experienced in every single industry. So I want to be very careful as a coach that I'm not stepping into being some sort of a consultant, because I'm not qualified. This is a good example. In your industry, in engineering, I am not qualified to be a consultant in anything related to engineering. What I can do is I can help you on the leadership side of things and help you get to a resolution or get to a decision. Certainly, there are times when I will make a suggestion of something to try that's related to leadership, that you can go back and communicate to someone or have a conversation, or ask you if you've tried to have a particular conversation or approach it a certain way. And basically, we're helping you to get to that point so that you feel confident enough to go back and do that and try that and see if that helps that particular situation move forward.
Gotcha. Good advice. Why don't you tell us more about your book that you have?
Yeah. So my book is called The Indispensable Leader. And basically, I start off the book by kind of going down this path. I'm sure many of your listeners have heard the idea of, or the question of, are you a manager or are you a leader? It's a pretty common thing that people ask. And I kind of start off the book by saying, I don't like that question, because it implies that somebody who may consider themselves a manager can't be a leader. And that's not really how we should be looking at it. In fact, I don't think in most cases when people do ask that, I honestly don't think that's what they actually mean. I think what they mean is are you a manager or are you a visionary? And in the context of, there's a organization called EOS Worldwide out there, and they have a system that they use for strategic planning. They refer to manager as integrator. So if you start to see that term, and it's becoming more common, so you could use the term integrator as well, but in my book, I use the term manager. So basically, as you look at this, if you think about manager and visionary, the manager is somebody who is highly organized. They're methodical. They're talking about how are we going to do this and what are we going to do? They're that person. They're talking about what the work is going to be. They're looking at what potential roadblocks are going to come up, what challenges are going to come up. They're not always interested in the why. They just want to know what they need to do, and it's their job to get it done. Whereas on the opposite end of that is the visionary. That's the person. These are usually highly entrepreneurial people. They are passionate. They have big ideas. They generate a lot of ideas. They're the person that's wanting to talk about why we're doing something. Oftentimes, they don't really care about the how or the what. They don't care about how we get there or what we're going to do. They only see the end. So in their mind, it's done. Like, as soon as they think of the idea, it's done. It's complete. Good job, everybody. Move forward. Now, there's a problem with both sides of that spectrum. You don't want to be at the far end of either one, because you don't want to be entirely managerial where you're only focused on accomplishing a task, because you could get so focused on accomplishing that task that you lose sight of that why that's out there. And maybe the why changes over time, or maybe it disappears entirely and you only care about checking the box. So you have your list, I'm checking my things to get them done. And that's all I care about. I got it done. So you don't want to be at that far end. You also don't want to be at the far visionary end either, because there are those folks too. So the really high visionary people who can't tap into their manager side at all. They're coming up with so many ideas all the time. They're overwhelming their team members with new ideas all the time. And before their team members can make progress on one, they've moved on to another one. So then they overwhelm people. And oftentimes you see a case where they may start losing employees or that sort of thing, and they can't make any progress at all. So basically my book talks about this, and I basically say, let's not think about it as a spectrum. Let's think about it more like a Venn diagram where you have two intersecting circles. And what I want you to do is I want you to take the best traits of managerial, or the best managerial traits and the best visionary traits, and kind of package those up into something that helps you become the best possible leader that you can be. Now, you're not going to be able to pull in every single good trait from the other side, because it may not be in your nature, but you can pull in the ones that you actually can accomplish. And the idea is then to hopefully release some of those things that are maybe the more problematic things, that are the overbearing side of each end of that spectrum. And the book then really walks through a variety of suggestions on leadership topics and some very basic level things on things that you can learn and do over time to make yourself the best possible leader that you can be. And so that's really how the Indispensable Leader came about, and what it addresses throughout the book.
Very cool. To your point about the visionary types, I know as engineers, we get driven crazy when people are like too much like that, because they don't even know what's realistic, right? So I think of like some of these big companies, like that's like the Steve Jobs type. But like if a person like that is not technical and it's a technical type of product, it drives engineers crazy, because it's like you can't make this thing, or you can't make it for a price that you want. You know what I mean? It's like, and so it's just like a constant conflict, because they just want it done. And then, the people on the practical side are like, yeah, but that can't be done. At
Yeah,
least
certainly.
not for the price you want.
Yeah, and certainly Steve Jobs is a good example of that. He was very high visionary, and that showed. I mean, he obviously had some difficulties early on in his career, losing his company and then eventually coming back. What he figured out eventually is, and sometimes this is what it takes. Sometimes you don't have the skill set, you can't gain the skill set. So if you don't have it and you can't gain it, whether you're on the manager side or the visionary side, then you got to hire it. And what Steve Jobs figured out is that he had to hire people around him that could do that side of things. And he had to have a highly trusting relationship with those individuals in order to be successful. And that can happen no matter which side you're on, whether you're the visionary or whether you're more of a managerial mind, because there are certainly, I'm sure you know this, you've met some, I'm sure, where you have managers who were really good in their industry and they ended up starting their own company, and suddenly they're the leader of that company. They are now put in a position to be the visionary, as well as make sure all the stuff gets done, especially when you're a smaller company. So if you have somebody who can't get past all that managerial stuff and they get bogged down in the detail all the time, they aren't going to be able to accomplish anything either, because they're so stuck on making it perfect or doing too many steps or checking their box. So then sometimes what that means is even though that person is the owner of the company, maybe they become the COO and they hire a CEO to help come in with that visionary side of things and to run those things and be more involved. Oftentimes you'll see those individuals highly involved in business development and marketing and those things as well. And sometimes you have to hire from that side too.
Yeah, it kind of is my situation now, because, I'm the owner of this company and I've got 5 employees, and, I have to manage them, but at the same time, I can't be totally bogged down in just that, or I'll never grow into new things. Like I have to take time to envision new products and new options to grow the business. Otherwise, it'll just be like a hamster wheel. It'll just be the same thing forever.
Yeah, that's really kind of why I went down the path that I went down with offering fractional leadership services too, because I'm kind of somebody who can play in both sides. My mind is more managerial, so more on the organized side, on the like taking vision and executing it and making stuff happen. But I can play in the visionary world, so that means that it makes it easy for me to translate ideas and work with high visionary people and manager folks as well. And that's why I went down the fractional leadership side of things, because there's so many small organizations out there that need a COO, but maybe can't afford it yet. They can't afford a full-time COO for, depending on what part of the country you're in, you're talking anywhere from $150,000 to $500,000 a year, depending on where you're at and what size your company is. But they could afford somebody for half-time or 1 or 2 days a week or that sort of thing. And so fractional leadership is a good option for all of your listeners who have smaller companies out there. It's definitely a good option for you to take a look at because it gives you opportunities, not just in the COO realm, but there's fractional marketing folks out there now. There's fractional CFOs and everything.
Can you give us an example? And you work as a fractional CEO, so you could tell from experience, but like what are some of the things that they would do? Because now you've got your full-time CEO and you've got the fractional one. So they've got to be really on the same page to make that work. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of like overlap, duplicated work, conflicts, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's another situation that it looks different for everybody, but addressing the scenario you just gave, when a fractional COO comes in, it's very important for them to establish a good relationship with that CEO. You're going to be having weekly meetings. Like any good fractional COO is going to have it as part of their package that they have a weekly one-on-one with that CEO, because you got to be on the same page as to what does the CEO want that person working on. Also, what are the boundaries? And it's very broad. So I've had cases where it's very project based. We don't need somebody permanently. We need somebody to come in. We have this huge project for this quarter. We need somebody to drive operationally to drive this forward and make sure this gets complete and to kind of take over leadership of this project. So that's a short-term thing. And that's a very easily defined thing. Then there are situations where they're like, we need somebody to come in as a CEO or COO and be a leader and lead the team and help develop those individuals and help with hiring and help with project management and help with leading the sales team and everything. Well, that looks much different because that requires a whole different level of communication on an ongoing basis. You're going to be working with a lot more people. It also means that you have to talk about what is the timing here, because can you do that in 1 day a week? And if your budget is 1 day a week and you want all those things, I don't think I can do that in 8 hours every week. So you have to have that conversation as to what that looks like. It may mean that it's going to have to be 2 or 3 days a week, or maybe it is for a defined time. Maybe the first 3 months or 6 months, we're going to have to do 3 days a week, and then maybe we can pull that back later. And then at some point, the goal is down the road, and this may be multiple years down the road, depending on the growth of that organization. Eventually, they're going to want to hire a full-time COO, and then that fractional person can help them do that as well.
I would imagine that the fractional, well, depending on what that person's goals are, they might just become the full-time CEO at that point. They already know everything. Like that's a natural progression, you would think.
Yeah, it is entirely possible. It depends on what that person's goals are. And I know other folks who have done that, who it just made sense. They decided to move out of their business and move into the other business and take over as a full-time COO. And then I know other individuals who this is what they do and this is what they love, and they love running their own business, and they want to stay as a fractional, and they'll help that company then hire a full-time COO. So it really just kind of depends.
Because as a fractional, you're essentially a freelancer, like kind of like me. Like I'm a freelance engineer. You're a freelance CEO. Like one day you're working on this company, so once you stop doing that, and you kind of become an employee of the company if you're not working for multiple.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. So typically a fractional COO in the realm that I've been in, typically they'll work from anywhere between 3 to 8 clients at a time. It just depends on the amount of time that those clients need and everything. And then, it just depends. I also know individuals who have only worked, they only work with like 2 clients at a time because they give them a ton of time. Now they charge more, obviously, but they give them a ton of time. And then certainly it could move into that where they end up just deciding to go on full time with one of those companies.
Yeah, one time I had an opportunity to basically more or less be an employee of this guy. Basically, he wanted me to take all of my time for his project. And at the end of the day, I refused to do it because now in my mind, well, one, I was now an employee. I didn't want to be an employee, but also, if he cancels the project or whatever, I've got nothing in the pipeline. So I was like, no, I'm not willing to put all my eggs in one basket. So I told him I would do
Yeah.
20 hours a week, but not 40 because, if I do all 40 hours, then I have no time left to manage any other even if I have employees working on other projects, I still have to check their work and, get things moving along. And there'd be no time at all if I had to sit there and do work with this guy. So I just, I made
Yeah.
that decision.
It's interesting you say that. I actually met with somebody a while back, probably, I don't know, a couple of months ago, who used to do fractional COO work. And I just wanted to kind of pick his brain on some things. And I was talking to him and I'm like, why did you get out of it? And that's actually the scenario that happened to him. So he had one client that was one of his bigger clients and they were going to bring him on full time. So he started helping make that transition. And what happened is that meant he stopped doing business development for his own company because he was going to move on. Well, then they changed their mind. And now he has nobody in the pipeline, like you said. And he actually got out and he went and worked for another company because he's like, it took too long to build up my client base. I'm not starting over. And he had this other opportunity. So he took this other opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I wouldn't do that. I like what I'm doing and I wouldn't want to put myself in that situation. I mean, I would eventually find more work, but it would be a rough couple of months for sure
Yeah.
while I had nothing, going on. Okay, well, let's get towards wrapping up. Um, the second to last question I always ask is, what is your number one tip for the audience?
The number one tip.
Yes.
So this is a little bit of a story that I'll tell, but my biggest tip is as you start to lead people, don't underestimate the impact that you're having because you may be having an impact that you have no idea is actually happening. And my story behind this is at the beginning of my career, I mentioned to you, I started my career as one of 6 managers at a 22 screen movie theater. And in those days, it was still all film based and everything. Well, as a manager, you would be assigned, if you were assigned to close, you had to stay there till all the movies were done and everything was done. Well, Thursday nights were always the worst nights to do it because Thursday nights is when all the new movies came in that were going to open on Friday, and all of the old movies that are done after Thursday have to be sent back. And at that point, it was all film. So basically, they come in on separate reels, where a typical movie might be 6 to 8 reels. And then somebody has to basically put these on this big platter, this big plate, it looks like, and basically splice all these reels together one at a time and into one giant reel. And then that's how the movies would run. Nowadays, it's much better. It's just either they come in on hard drives or they come in on download and it all happens miraculously automatic. I envy those folks. But anyway, back then, this was the case. And what I would do is, so a lot of managers, they would finish their closing duties and all the financial stuff and everything, and they would just sit in the office and wait for the projectionist to finish everything. I always thought that was ridiculous because I had to stay there until as long as it took, and it could be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on those days. So I was trained to do it. So I always went and helped. When I was done with my stuff, I would go help. It's called tearing down, where you tear down the old prints that are going back. We basically wind them back onto their individual reels and break the splices so that they end up back on their 6 or 8 reels. So I was helping do this. And basically what happens is if you picture this giant movie print laying flat, all wound up on this platter, and then it goes off onto this machine that winds it onto the individual reels. And there's this knob that you can turn to speed up or slow down as you get going. So I got it all started. I was speeding it up on I don't remember if this was the first reel or the second reel or the third reel I was on, but it was early in the process, I can tell you that. And I sped this thing up because I'm like, I want to get out of here. And I've done it lots of times before, but in the middle of the print, there's this center metal ring that has pegs that go down into the platter, and that's what holds the print on the platter when it spins. Apparently, the pegs were not put into the platter because I'm sitting there and all at once, this whole print flies off into the projection booth, and it's like, whew, and it was, you have those slow motion moments in your life. This was one of those where I'm watching this thing slowly fly across the projection booth and it ends up on the floor. Now, this is not the case of, oh, just pick it up and put it back on. No, it's in one big knot by that point. Think of like, I don't know, Christmas lights in Christmas Vacation, the Christmas lights in Christmas Vacation.
Yeah, I remember tape reel when it came to like, I'm 40 years old, so I was born in 83. So I remember the cassette tape. So it's similar to that, right? Like it's like an actual magnetic, like kind of fabric strip.
Yeah, so it's like celluloid film, and it's about 2 inches wide, and it's flat.
And it's thin. It's thin,
very
right?
thin. Yes,
it's
very
kind of,
thin.
It's kind of fragile. Like you could rip it easily. So like if it gets tangled in a knot, you could probably untangle it if you're careful, but like you're going to ruin the images on there because it's going to get finger smudges.
Yeah, the problem is you can't untangle it because this is thousands of feet of film because, like I said, there's probably still 5 reels on there. So I'm looking at this on the floor going, you are so fired. Like, that's what I was thinking. And the projectionist comes around the corner then, and she's like, what the heck happened? And I'm like, just go. I'll take care of it. Just go finish the other stuff. So I spend until about 7:30 in the morning slowly pulling bits of film out and unknotting it. And I had to cut it a lot of times and unbreak and basically get the knots out and then resplice it and cut it some more. And this thing had more slices in it than a Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm telling you,
it was ruined. Like you probably wasted. You probably shouldn't even bother. You just hold them and destroy. Like you spent all that. You spent all that time to try to repair it, but really it was a lost cause.
Yes. So at any rate, I got it all back in the cans and everything, and I went home and I showered. My managing director was going to be back at 9, so I showered and I came immediately back, and I'm standing outside of his office. I literally remember standing there like, well, this is it. You're done. You got to find a new job. Because these things are thousands of dollars a reel, I'm sure, at this point. And I walk in and I kind of tell him the whole story. And I said, here's what I think happened. And here's what I did. I even said, I'm like, I'm sure that this print is ruined and we're going to have to pay for it. And he looks at me and he goes, Darby, he's like, I appreciate you coming in and telling me. Why don't you go home and get some sleep? And that was the end of it. Like, he let it be. He knew I had done everything that I could do to fix it. He knew that I was stressed out about it. And that was the end of it. And we all went on. And of course, obviously, we wanted to make sure that doesn't happen again. But here's what that did. And this is getting to my point of the story. That was my very first job in my career. It changed how I led people my entire career. That one interaction with that guy changed. And it's this guy talking to this kid. To him, the moment, I mean, it was expensive. I'm sure it was significant from that standpoint. But in general, the moment to him was probably insignificant. Like, I doubt he would remember it today. But to me, it had a huge impact because you know how many times I've had people sitting across my desk from me looking at me like they're worried they're getting fired over a mistake that they made. You know how many times I've been able to say, have a seat, let me tell you a story? A lot. And it totally changed how I lead. Now, like I said, I don't think he knows what the impact he had on me was. So how many times have I done that, and how many lives have I impacted? And then think about the ripples that go out from there. If he can affect me, and I can affect however many leaders in my career that I can affect, and those people can affect, 50 more people. Imagine that turns into a tidal wave of change before long. And that's what we need to understand as leaders and as you start to lead people is. So my tip boils down to, long story short here, my tip boils down to just understand that you are probably having a bigger impact on people than you realize, both from a positive and a negative. So you have to be careful, because I've had times when I've lost my temper, and I always have to go back to the individuals and say, I apologize. I should not have said that, because you have to correct those mistakes. Otherwise, you could change them for the worse in those cases. So just understand what your impact is.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. You know, I've had to fire a few people over the years, but it was not, I never do it because it was a mistake. I do it because it was something under their control. And, like for example, like one guy just wasn't getting the work done, didn't respond to me after many, many attempts and had no real excuse. It's like, okay. But other people just made mistakes and I don't even hold it against them. It's like they're human, right? So it really comes down to like your situation, like it wasn't like you do it all the time. It was gonna happen to somebody and you did what you could to fix it. Like there would be a terrible reason to fire somebody just because they slipped up. So I
Yep,
totally
exactly.
agree with what you're saying. All right, lastly, if people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
Best way is to go to my website. It is beindispensable.com. So like BE and then indispensable.com. You can just Google it too. There's information about me, about my company. You can find links to buy the book if you want to buy the book. Also, if you want to connect with me, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So you can just search for my name, Darby Vannier. You'll find me on there and I connect with most anybody. As long as you don't immediately turn around and send me a sales pitch, I will stay connected with you.
I get that. All right, well, Darby, thanks very much for your time, and we'll catch everyone next time on the podcast.